Next up, we have a very brave young man, Sean Atkinson. And many of you saw the whistleblower interview that Sean did just recently, whistleblowing on his experience of BelongTo. Sean is the co-founder and vice president of Not All Gays. He recently did the whistleblower because he attended the BelongTo Youth group services. And you heard Stephanie talk a lot about activists, and we've seen how activists have captured the classroom. And Sean's going to share some firsthand experience of his experience with an activist NGO called BelongTo. Thank you.
Hey, thanks very much for having me. Can you hear me, yeah? And today I'm going to be talking about BelongTo, my experience there, and the kind of information that they're bringing into schools. So starting off, who are BelongTo? BelongTo are an Irish state-funded NGO that were launched in 2003, initially to provide support for young LGBT people in Ireland, and they receive over €1 million funding a year. With this funding, they and the young people that attend their youth groups, they push legislation into government, such as when they wanted to lower the Gender Recognition Act to people below the age of 16. And BelongTo run several youth groups across Ireland where the age range varies from 14-year-old children to adults up to 24, which is a huge safeguarding risk. And then we're going into my story. I attended BelongTo when I was 16 because, as Mary was saying earlier, the LGBT community is very presented as a chosen family, and I wanted to kind of experience that. But I didn't know that I'd be met with adults who ended up taking me into nightclubs, buying me alcohol, and different things like that. I did an interview with the Natural Women's Council of Royal Media where I really talked about my experience and what happened there. So if you'd like to hear more about that, you can find it on their YouTube. And one thing I was asked after this was, are you in a cult? And I'll let you decide for yourself. But the symptoms of a cult are control and isolation. And in BelongTo, we were told not to talk about BelongTo and don't question the group's beliefs. Manipulation. If you stray from typical gender roles, or you're on, that means you're on the trans spectrum. For example, a boy who doesn't like sports isn't a boy. This was something that was told to me in BelongTo. And demands for loyalty. Gender ideology isn't a belief, it's a reality. As well, there's lack of tolerance. Question gender ideology is never allowed. Anyone who does so is humiliated or outcast. Information control. Don't read or listen to various outlets or people that might challenge the group's rhetoric. Such as J.K. Rowling, when she spoke out, we were told she's a Nazi, she's a fascist, she's a transphobe, a homophobe, so on. Emotional and thought control. BelongTo is a safe space. Homophobia is everywhere. The community is threatened daily and we are constantly oppressed. These were kind of beliefs that were pushed onto us, so we felt constantly like there was people out to get us. And there was one incident outside of BelongTo where I had a homophobic attack, and I actually went to them for help and they did nothing. This happened to me, a 15-year-old lesbian and a 14-year-old boy in a McDonald's Temple Bar by a security guard, and BelongTo did nothing to help. And what is BelongTo's role in the classroom? Basically, BelongTo have been going into schools for years with Stand-Up Week, but in June 2021, alongside Dublin City Council, BelongTo sent out pledge packs to 26 schools across Ireland, and 4 of them rejected it. So 22 schools accepted the pledge pack, in which the school promised to take part in BelongTo's yearly Stand-Up Week, which we'll get into. And they also made a pledge to support gender ideology and the beliefs gender ideology. But then in 2024, an FOI was sent to the Department of Education requesting information on whether or not any risk assessments had been taking place with BelongTo's activity in school, and the answer was no. There was no risk assessments done. And Stand-Up Week takes place every November, usually from the 14th to the 18th, and they attend secondary schools, youth reaches across Ireland, where they get the young people to colour in all the different flags. Personally, I think the only flag that should be in schools is the Irish flag. It includes all the students. And they teach children about all these different definitions about gender ideology. They make students come into school dressed as different colours of the rainbow, and they stand all together and take a picture of them. And in the Stand-Up toolkit, you can see this information, isn't it? Hormone replacement therapy, top surgery, bottom surgery, binding and tucking. This was information that I was told about and BelongTo. And none of this information was ever presented as irreversible. It was always presented as safe, something that you can do. So I've gone through each of them and put some examples of the dangers of all these different informations. So hormone replacement therapy. There's many risks with hormone replacement therapy, but we're going to focus on young women because the effects on young women are just awful. Testosterone in a young woman's body can lead to many issues such as vaginal atrophy, osteoporosis, an increased risk of early onset dementia. I believe a study came out last year that showed within 5 months of being on testosterone, a young woman has a 200% increased risk of early onset dementia, and menopause in teenage girls. Tucking. On the mile end, tucking causes skin irritations, infections, testicular pain, urinary tract issues. On the more severe end, it can lead to hernias, testicular torsions, chronic pain, and impaired fertility. And I've attached a news article there about a transgender woman who was forced to have his testicles removed after it became twisted from tucking. And there's a little diagram there in the corner if you'd like to see what tucking is. You basically get your balls and push them up, which is very dangerous, obviously. And here there's a Walmart ad of tucking underwear that you can buy that helps you with this. Breast binding. Breast binding risks include back pain, skin irritation, breathing difficulties, rib fractures, and even deformities. And there's many different ways you can bind. The most dangerous is when you actually wrap stuff around and squeeze it in. And in BelongTo, on their website, alongside TENI, they had a 3-minute guide to transition, which includes a link on where to buy binders and how to bind. And they frequently talked about this, but they never went into the risk with it. And there's many studies that say that, oh, it's binding or suicide. If I don't bind, I'm going to be more likely to have depression or whatever. But then it never goes into the actual risks of binding whatsoever. Top surgery, otherwise known as a double mastectomy, is the removal of a woman's healthy breast in the name of gender-affirming surgery. There are many risks associated with this, from scarring, infection, necrosis of the nipples, the inability to breastfeed. And I've put an example of a detransitioner, Chloe Cole, who's absolutely fantastic. She's American, and she goes from each different jurisdiction in America trying to combat. I tell her story of detransitioning. Because only at 15 years of age, she was given top surgery. And now she's detransitioned. She'll never be able to breastfeed her children if she has any. So she's really fighting that. She was also given hormones at a young age, and the altercations of that are also irreversible. Bottom surgery, this varies depending on if you're male or female. Essentially, it is the removal of one's genitals, which causes lifelong sexual dysfunction, nerve damage, bleeding, repeat infection, and urinary incontinence. And I've attached 2 detransitioners there. Scott Nugent is a female who is detransitioning, who receives bottom surgery, and she's talked very vocally about the damages unto her life. Richie Heron is a man who's detransitioned. I really admire Richie. I think he's a brilliant man. He's extremely brave. What they did to him in the gender clinic is unforgivable. So I'd really recommend reading into all 3 of their stories and hearing from them. And I'd also recommend going into on the transgender subreddits, different forums where they talk about these surgeries and the effects it's had. Basically, if you're a man and they remove your genital, it's an open wound for life. Constant infection. It doesn't work as intended. It's not a vagina. They've completely lied to these young people, and it's painted as something that's completely safe and not damaging. When you can see even the people that are still under these beliefs, they're still struggling after what's happened to them. It's unforgivable, if you ask me. And here's 2 diagrams of basically what they do. With women, they take a skin graft off the arm and, causing permanent nerve damage there. They mould it into a shape of a penis, and then they attach it down below. They mould balls, and they add in a pump to make it work. It's just disgraceful. Then for the men, they basically cut the dick open, flip it inside out, and push it in. And it's absolutely horrible. And they tell young people about these things. These are serious surgeries. They're extremely experimental. They're not safe. They haven't even figured out how to do it properly. There's so many. I'm not even sure what the number is, but the majority of people get these surgeries. They don't come out all right. Like, they always have issues forever, and they don't know. You see people who've gotten these surgeries 20 years ago. Now when they go for help, when there's something wrong, they don't know how to help them because they've never studied this before. They don't actually know. The people who've given them these surgeries can't help them, so they send them away. They constantly have to find different doctors. One thing BelongTo do is they go into schools with a quality mark, and at the minute there's 44 schools in this country that have received this quality mark, and essentially to receive it you need to have a gender neutral bathroom. The school needs to have some length of education on gender ideology and all the different definitions, and it comes out student fees every 18 months. You have to pay €845 are your own student fees for them to come in and basically evaluate everything. And I've added in the impact indoctrination has on young people. As someone who was, when I was 16, indoctrinated by gender ideology, and I've since desisted, at the time I was very depressed, I was very anxious, I was doing a lot of underage drinking, and unfortunately most people, as Stephanie was saying, who fall into gender ideology have comorbidities such as that. And the last thing young people need in these situations is to be medicalised. Quite often with young women, they suffer from anorexia or another eating disorder, and one thing gender ideology says is that if you're uncomfortable with your body, then there's something wrong with you. But I think everyone in this room has felt uncomfortable with their body. I think even without men coming into women's changing rooms, I think you'd still feel uncomfortable. You're uncomfortable showing your body off. That's completely normal, especially for teenagers. What gender ideology says, it's not normal, and they medicalise it, when we should all just be comfortable being uncomfortable with ourselves. That's the way I look at it. And what's next on BelongTo's agenda? It's primary schools. Trying to move into primary schools to teach even younger children. And these children are way too young to be learning about all these different genders and beliefs and everything. But the framework they've used to create this primary school curriculum, they've built it off LGBT Youth Scotland. Because when I talk about the age range with these LGBT youth groups, it's not just BelongTo. All across the UK, the US, Europe, the age ranges vary from 11-year-olds to 26-year-old adults, all in the same room. What kind of adult wants to be in the same room as an 11-year-old child? Use your imagination there. But the framework they've used to build this comes straight from LGBT Youth Scotland, whose chief is in prison from being involved in one of the biggest paedophile rings in Scotland. And there's plenty of articles about this. In the second article I've attached there, I know one of the survivors from that. He's a brilliant man, extremely brave. What's happened in BelongTo is nothing compared to what went on in LGBT Youth Scotland. And unfortunately, this is just common because with the LGBT community, you can't criticise them. You can't ask safeguarding issues. It's constantly seen as, homophobic, transphobic, an attack, which isn't the case. We should be able to criticise anything and ask questions. That's the way I look at it. So if you're a parent and you don't want BelongTo being in your school, I'd recommend writing to your school, pulling your child out of those aspects of education and making it clear you do not want your child having anything got to do with gender ideology. You can reach out to the Natural Women's Council or any of the other groups here today for support on that. You can reach out to Not All Gays. We'd happily help you in any way we can. At the minute, we're running a campaign where we're contacting all the 44 schools in the quality mark. In my group, Not All Gays, 4 of our members are ex-BelongTo attendees going back to 2005. So we're contacting these schools and telling them what we witnessed, what we experienced, what we were fed, and hopefully we're getting them to stand up against BelongTo and not welcome them in schools anymore. And thanks.